Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Geopolitics with Abu. To my returning subscribers, thank you. If you are just joining, please do like, subscribe, and follow us at Geopolitics with Abu for exciting content. Today, my guest is Dolores Agrasso from Argentina. She's my former colleague at Riley Risk. She's the geopolitical and security analyst for Riley Risk, covering Americas. She's also the lead analyst for the Riley Sentinel platform, a platform that gives accurate geopolitical and security analysis for multinationals and companies that are operating in high-risk environment. Thank you very much, Dolores, for joining me.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here, and it's an absolute pleasure. So I trust we'll have an interesting conversation today.
Very well, you will have it. The topic today is drug trafficking in Latin America and its geopolitical consequences for Africa, with a particular focus on West Africa. Dolores, the Trump administration strategy for engaging Latin America, especially in its second term, is through security, which focuses on checking the flow of migrants, which allegedly enables the entrance of drugs and criminals into the U.S. Accordingly, the U.S. has added several drug cartels in the region into its list of terrorist groups. The groups include El Salvador's MS-23, United Cartel and La Familia Mexicana of Mexico, and Colombia's Gulf Clan, among others. The U.S. has also ended protected migrant status for Latin American countries and increased deportation. Please, can you give us an overview of the drug trade in Latin America?
Of course, yes. Well, we are all aware that drug trafficking into the US is a huge problem, not only for them, but also for us, Latin Americans. And it has been happening for several years. And at the moment, there was no effective strategy to stop the flow for these processed drugs from Latin America into the US. So what this new Trump administration is doing is actually trying to stop this flow by stopping the migrants. And this strategy is quite tricky because I can assure you, I guarantee you that in most cases, these migrants are not the ones who are carrying this, especially cocaine, into the US. So I believe this decision has two main angles, if you ask me. One is to stop illegal migration that has been an absolute mess in the US, and that is true. And also try to tackle drug trafficking into the US. So if you have seen the news, and it has been all over the place, there has been this decision of the Trump administration to deport some Venezuelan migrants into El Salvador. This is a joint measure between President Bukele in El Salvador, and President Trump in the US. So if you read different newspapers and different opinions, you'll see that there are mixed feelings into the topic on whether these migrants deported were actually members of Aragua Tren de Aragua, which is this Venezuelan well-known criminal organization, or if they were merely migrants. So these migrants were sent to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. This prison is called SECOT, which is an acronym for Center of Confinement of Terrorism. So this is actually the aim of this huge prison. This prison was inaugurated in 2023 and can actually hold more or less 40,000 inmates, which is a lot. And the inmates are in these prisons have some characteristics that distinguish this prison for other prisons in El Salvador. So inmates in the Secot cannot receive visitors, cannot receive family members or friends. They don't eat meat because President Bukele considers that having meat in El Salvador is a privilege. And if the general population isn't allowed to buy meat, why will these inmates condemned and sent to this prison would have meat in their meals? And the cells have no windows, so the inmates cannot see the exterior. And this is not the case of these migrants sent to the Secot, but the gang members or the Salvadorian prisoners that are in the Secot won't see the exterior in their lifetime. They are condemned there forever. So this situation has received a lot of backlash, especially for NGOs and in social media, because of its impact. Is this humanitarian? Does this decision respect human rights or not? So this is one of the main debates on social media at the moment.
Thank you very much, Dolores, for those comprehensive analysis. And I want to actually talk about the El Salvador US partnership. The president is very interesting because I've been following him. He came into power in 2019 and oversaw a massive crackdown and declared a state of emergency. And it seems the measure has worked because it actually seemed like he was cozying up to the gang members. Then he made a U-turn and cracked down on them. And then it has led to at least 90% reduction in crime rates. And this agreement with US to even take US citizens and even put them in prison seemed to make him gain favor for the United States. Do you see other South American countries emulating this? Because even for El Salvador, I read quite a lot, and I realized that remittance from the US plays a very important role in the GDP of El Salvador. So do you see other Latin American countries emulating this system that Bukele has put in place, and it has been effective, even though they have been backlashed because of the humanitarian situation, human rights of prisoners that have not been respected in some cases?
Yeah, what you have mentioned is very, very interesting, and it has to do with that the penitentiary system of El Salvador, as it is at the moment, is very expensive. It's massive. So the idea of this cooperation among the US and El Salvador will bring El Salvador millions. So it brings a solution to the US because they can send their prisoners away and lock them in a maximum security facility away from the country. And it also helps El Salvador to maintain this, not only this penitentiary system that they have practiced, but the thing that you mentioned earlier, the popularity of this model for export that El Salvador has crafted. So I'm going to mention a little example from Argentina. So there has been some talks or discussions between our government, Argentina's government, and El Salvador's government in order to try to replicate what has been done in El Salvador here in Argentina. So Argentina has, to give you an idea, 47 million inhabitants here. So despite it is quite a big country in terms of territory, we don't have as much population as Brazil, not in a million years. So the thing here in Argentina is that crime rates are going high, and there is no possibility at the moment to stop definitively what is happening here with the criminal organizations. So our Minister of Security uploaded a picture in X, in her social media, of prison here, and she sent a message saying something like, we're going to replicate what has happened in El Salvador, criminals beware. And the thing here in Argentina is that we don't have the capacity at the moment to build such prisons and take such measures. So criminals laughed and even sent a mafia-like message to our minister. And that's the thing, trying to be El Salvador without having the funds and without having the strategy. So going back to your question, can any country in Latin America replicate what has been done in El Salvador? We can, but it will take a lot of time and a lot of funding. So El Salvador is quite smaller than Argentina or Brazil or Colombia in terms of population and territory. So in these big countries of the southern cone, it's even more difficult to develop this strategy given the amount of money and investment that you would need.
Wow. Thank you very much for those comprehensive analysis once again. Now let's look at the geopolitical consequences of this drug trade, and to West Africa, my region, which is going to be the focus. West Africa and the Sahel, they remain a transit route for drugs from Latin America to Asia. West Africa has remained a route. In fact, there are like plenty hotspots. Like most of the country, the West Africa hotspot, the countries include the Benin Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau is very, very critical because it has been referred to the African narco state. In fact, the president, it will interest you to know that the son of the president was sentenced to the prison in the US for 6 years for sponsoring an international drug trafficking rate. In Nigeria, our Atlantic Ocean coast city in Lagos, they've been bossed by the drug law enforcement agency on warehouses. In Senegal, they've been bossed too, and in Sierra Leone, in fact, the ambassador to Guinea was recalled because there were suspicions that he was involved in the drug trade. The drug trade from Latin America to West Africa, it arrives at mostly imported from Brazil through the highway, where they call the Highway 10 route, South America to West African route. So what are your thoughts on this, Dolores?
Yes, this is one of the routes that carries on the highest flow of cocaine from Latin America to the African continent. There has been some reports now that shipments from Ecuador are also sailing to West and Central Africa, but Brazil still is the main, let's say, transit country in order to ship Latin American cocaine to the African continent. So we could also mention, for instance, East Africa shipments to Kenya, and also South Africa as a country that in the southern of the African continent is receiving cocaine shipments. But this combination, Brazil, West Africa, is now key to understanding this drug trafficking cooperation among criminal organizations from Latin America and from the African country. So at the moment, the trend is that we are reaching historically high levels of cocaine production. So this means more profits for these Latin American and criminal organizations, provided that they can sell this cocaine. So these high levels of cocaine productions open the door to more cooperation among criminal organizations from all over the world. So what we are seeing at the moment is that Latin American criminal organizations, cartels especially dedicated to drug trafficking, are establishing relationships with these criminal organizations in Africa in order to provide them technical knowledge in order to how to transit this cocaine, how to store it, and especially how to deliver this cocaine into Europe, that is one of the main consumers of the world. So it's really interesting because that cocaine is made of the coca plant. So this plant doesn't actually grow anywhere in the world. It needs certain weather conditions in order to grow properly. So at the moment, we were seeing that Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia were historical producers of this coca plant. And now we have seen reports that countries like Guatemala, Honduras, and Venezuela are also growing this plant. So what we will see in the future is a world loaded with cocaine. And the trends indicate that the consumers are also increasing. So there is more demand, there is more cooperation between Africa and Latin America, sadly, regarding drug trafficking, and there are also more profits. So think what could happen if, let's take Nigeria as an example. If Nigerian organizations, criminal organizations, could gain more money, would this lead to more corruption? So this is one of the key points I wanted to make while addressing the cooperation in criminal organizations between these two continents.
And to add to what you are saying, this report also indicates that it is now funding the terrorism and exacerbating the situation in the Sahel, with cocaine trade now surpassing ransom payments by these terrorists. The region, the Sahel region now is now a transit route and a very, very huge consumer market. The terrorist group are acting as middlemen to fund their activities with the rates, as you have said, with the rising local consumption, and even the drug trafficking group teaching this, cooperating with this terrorist group for domestic cocaine production. So this is something that we have to look and to be checking for future purposes in addressing this issue. And now let's talk about the positive side of things, the cooperation between Latin America and Africa. And I want to use Brazil because we spoke about Brazil. I want to use Brazil and Nigeria as a springboard for this, because there is a lot to benefit between both continents, not just the negative side of the drug trafficking trade. Because recently, Nigeria and Brazil signed an agreement, a commercial agreement, a $1.2 billion green imperative deal to ensure food security in the country. It will interest you to know that it is the largest agricultural project in Africa, and it prioritizes development of sustainable low-carbon agricultural development in the future. And what excites me is that it's not only agriculture. We are also saying it will also entail cooperation in terms of the materials, agricultural materials, like not the agricultural tools. They will also exchange knowledge. And we know that Brazil is the 10th largest economy in the world and a very, very important country in Latin America. So I'm interested, what are your thoughts on this and for further cooperation within the South countries?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this today, and if you think it through, both Latin America and Africa were once European colonies. So we have this common past. And if you see the societies in Latin America, the modern societies, we have lots of African diasporas. And what you can tell is that this has influenced the cuisine, the food, the music, and sometimes the religion. So we're very alike. And it's a pity that we are not exploiting these similarities, because our societies could benefit a lot from these joint projects. So I was doing some reading and some research, and learned that Brazil was one of the countries that supported Nigeria joining the BRICS. And President Lula Silva has been a great promoter of commerce between Africa and Brazil. I could also mention Colombia and maybe Cuba, but we all know that Cuba is in no position to boost these commercial ties. But Brazil, as you have mentioned, is a major economy here in Latin America. And it could be, if you think it through, an equal of Nigeria in terms of regional commerce. So both Nigeria and Brazil are huge commercial hubs. So why not exploit these possibilities? I believe it was last week or within this month that Brazil and Nigeria have signed an agreement to establish a direct flights. Exactly. So this is the first step, because how are we going to connect with each other if we don't have direct flights, for instance? So I am very, very enthusiastic about these cooperation agreements, because as you have mentioned before, one tend to look at the negative aspects, the risks, the threats, and we don't often see the opportunities that this means for all of us. When thinking about these cooperation processes, I was thinking about Mercosur, this common southern market that integrates Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, also Brazil. There was an agreement that has been very polemic between this Mercosur and the European Union. And that was because several members of the European Union stated that making business and establishing commercial ties with these Latin American countries could harm their agriculture systems and markets. So in this context, I wanted to ask you, given that our continents are very similar in terms of industries and economies, do you see any harm in making these businesses, or rather do you think this could be a positive agreement between the countries of these two continents?
Yeah. Considering that in terms of bilateral trade between individual countries, like we are seeing this progress in a world where the US is conducting foreign policy through tariff. I believe that Africa and Latin America can provide an alternative source of global supply chain in terms of agriculture and in terms of mineral resources. For example, I believe that Brazil is one of the exporter of steel into US, and Africa has a lot of steel plant. You know that Africa, like, there's a lot of interest in African mineral resources. So these are areas that we could cooperate in, in order to, make our economics sanctions and tariff proof. Thank you, Dolores. And to close this episode, I wanted to talk about something important that caught my attention. First of all, do you know that your president, Argentinian president, Javier Milei, is very popular in Nigerian social media space?
I am learning that from you. I was honestly not aware, so I would like to know more.
Yeah, in fact, one of the opposition leaders in Nigeria, Atiku Abubakar, a very prominent opposition leader, once asked the current administration to mirror his economic policies.
Right.
When I looked at it, I realized that, Javier Milei, when he came to power, he started cutting government expenditures and cutting subsidies. It led to the budget deficit into surplus, but in the negative terms, it made the low household income. It increased the price of food and services and inflationary pressures on low income earners. So as an Argentinian, try and give me an unbiased analysis of his economic achievement for our Nigerian viewers to see.
Well, I'll try to be as objective as possible, and I will answer you, as you mentioned, as an Argentinian, not as a professional within geopolitics and security. So what you have mentioned is true. One of the strategies of this government that was highly publicized in the campaign was, and I'm quoting the president, destroying the state from within. What does this mean? Well, it has to do with not seeing the Argentinian state as a benefactor, but rather seeing it as a, empty organization. So basically, and being completely objective, it is true that the public expenditure was cut in record time. So as you have mentioned, subsidies have been cut. So the cost of services like gas, power, meaning energy, also even if it sounds silly, of the price of the water bill have increased a lot. And what concerns me the most is where are we going? Because the IMF is now happy with these cuts that have been made because we have met the expectations of the fund. You know that Argentina has a huge external debt that hasn't started with the President Milei. The first loan that Argentina asks was in 1821 to a British bank. Yes, we have been with this debt issue since that moment, and inflation has been a historical major issue for Argentina as well. So I want to make clear that, of course, President Milei is not to blame with the state that he found Argentina when he took office last year. But it's true that Argentina is not, Argentina can cover the expenses of everyone in the country, that is true. But how these cuts will impact in public health, in public education? What about our pensioners? You know that we have been having major protests where pensioners, the elderly, went to what we call the Pink House, the place here in Buenos Aires City where the president works in the center of the capital city. And these pensioners, these elderly, were met by the police with fierce force. So are these measures dividing society more than we were before? Are they really effective in conducting Argentina to a better place? So here we have two angles to conclude. Regarding the economic numbers, we are fantastic. Inflation has lowered. We are meeting these public expenditure goals. But what about society? Can people go to the supermarket and buy meat and buy dairy as they were doing before? Can people afford to send their children to school? Can youngsters afford working and going to school too? Where is Argentina going?
When you are mentioning all this, it just remembered me of Nigeria, because this is absolutely what is going on in Nigeria. What your president did is what our president did. In his first day, he announced the end to fuel subsidy, which led to a chain of events. And as we had, inflation is so high, and even though it is coming down a bit because of some measures put in place, but there is pressure among low-income households. Dolores, I want to thank you very much for your time and this episode. Please, can you tell your fans in Spanish to like, follow, and subscribe to Geopolitics with Abu before we go?
Of course. So, fans de América Latina, fans de Argentina, los invito a suscribirse al canal Geopolitics with Abu, Geopolítica con Abu, para seguir viendo más de estos episodios enriquecedores sobre qué está pasando en el mundo.
Gracias, Dolores. Thank you very much.
De nada.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.